or can hear what democracy sounds like. George Farah, there was a third-party candidate outside of Anderson. Of course, Ross Perot. So, George, how did he get into these debates? Why was it agreed then?
Amy, the Ross Perot story is absolutely fascinating, and I'd love to talk briefly about 1992 and 1996. Ross Perot managed to get into the 1992 presidential debates, and one of the great public misconceptions is that the commission invited him. The commission loves to take credit for it as well. They said, look, we are not as bipartisan or as partisan as people accuse us of being. We included Ross Perot in 1992. That's not what happened. President George H.W. Bush believed strategically that Ross Perot was taking votes from then-challenger Bill Clinton. And so Bush's campaign insisted on Ross Perot's inclusion. The commission actually opposed Perot's inclusion, first pushing to keep him out of all three debates, then lobbying for allowing him to participate in just a single debate. It was only because President George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton pushed for Perot's inclusion that he was included. If you fast forward 4 years later, Ross Perot ran for president again. He had $29 million in taxpayer funds. 76% of the American people wanted to see him in the presidential debates. He was widely deemed the winner of 2 of the 3 debates in 1992, yet he was excluded. Why? Because this time the candidates wanted to keep him out. Bob Dole was desperate to keep Perot out of the presidential debates because he thought Perot would take more votes away from him, and Bill Clinton didn't want anyone to watch these debates. He wanted what George Stephanopoulos told me was a non-event because he was comfortably leading in the polls. So they reached an outrageous agreement. Bill Clinton agreed to exclude Perot on the condition that one of the 3 debates was canceled and the remaining 2 debates were scheduled opposite the World Series of baseball, and no follow-up questions were asked. So this is what viewers at home got. They got no Perot, they got 2 debates at the same time as baseball, and they had no follow-up questions, and as exactly what President Bill Clinton wanted by design, the lowest debate audience in the history of presidential debates. And who took the heat? Not the candidates. The candidates never paid a political price. The polls after the debate showed that 50% of the public blamed the commission, only 13% blamed President Clinton, and only 5% blamed Bob Dole. In other words, the critical role the commission plays is allowing the candidates to engage in anti-democratic manipulations behind closed doors without having to pay a political price. If Bob Dole and Bill Clinton had to look in the camera, look and tell the American people, we're going to keep a candidate out that you're paying for, that you're supporting, and that you want to see, they would never have had the courage to do so. It would have been perceived as cowardly, and they would have been forced to allow Ross Perot on that stage.
What about this comment that Gary Johnson made, the former governor of New Mexico, who's running for president on the Libertarian line? This point about what you poll and this catch-22 of how do you increase your standing in the polls if you're not in the debates?
Due to explicit criticism of the commission in 1992 and 1996 and an investigation by the Federal Election Commission, the commission was forced to adopt a numerical figure as a kind of decision-making at what point third-party candidates could actually be allowed to participate in the presidential debates. So they have announced that if a third-party candidate or any candidate gets 15% of the polls, that they'll invite them to a presidential debate. 15% of the polls, Amy, that's crazy. There hasn't been a third-party candidate in the last 100 years that's gotten close to 15% of the polls prior to any sort of presidential debate. It's ridiculously high. Congress gives candidates millions of dollars of taxpayer funds if they win 5% of the popular vote. How is it that we can actually subsidize a candidate, yet they need 3 times that level of support just to get in these presidential debates? Third-party candidates faced extraordinary structural barriers, discriminatory ballot access, scant media coverage, loyalties of the political class in the voting public, enormous campaign finance disparities. So if they managed to convince a majority of Americans that they ought to be included in the presidential debates, it's outrageous that a private corporation backed by Anheuser-Busch, controlled by the 2 parties, is telling them no. It absolutely is a catch-22. The presidential debates are the gatekeepers to credibility. If a third-party candidate gets in, he's instantly deemed credible, viable, worthy of voter attention, and worthy of media attention. But if he's excluded, he's dismissed as marginal, unworthy of voter attention or media attention, and his campaign is relegated in many ways to the dustbins of history. This is outrageous that the gatekeepers to our election process are not nonpartisan entities like the League, but partisan individuals with loyalties to the Republican Democratic parties. It stifles debate by design.
How do you see this changing right now, George Farah? You're the founder and executive director of Open Debates. You've been watching this over the years. The League of Women Voters, are they organizing? How are other groups actually organizing? How do you see this playing out?
Well, we created something in 2004 called the Citizens Debate Commission. It was comprised of 17 civic leaders from across the political spectrum, from Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council on the right to Randall Robinson, founder of Trans Africa, on the left. It was backed by 60 civic groups on its advisory board, 23 newspapers around the country, from the LA Times to the Seattle Times, editorialized in support of the Citizens Debate Commission, and its specific purpose was clear. We were going to break the monopoly that the Commission exerts over our presidential debate process. Unfortunately, Amy, we failed, for the simple reason that there wasn't sufficient public pressure. But this is not reason to throw up your arms in defeat and say, oh my gosh, we can't break this. That was just planting the seeds. This was the beginning of a broad-based movement. The only way to truly break the monopoly of the Commission on Presidential Debates is to create a viable alternative that has so much grassroots support that it becomes politically costly for the major party nominees to avoid those debates. Once upon a time, the major party candidates could avoid debates altogether. There weren't presidential debates in 1964, 68, and 72 because it wasn't expected. Now, any major party candidate seen avoiding the debates looks cowardly. It's impossible. They must debate, whether they like it or not. We just want to take that expectation the public has and elevate it so that not only will a candidate pay a price if they avoid debates, but they'll pay a political price if they avoid real debates that they aren't controlling. So this is a matter of evolving and pushing the public expectation. And step by step, I think we're going to succeed. It's just a matter of time. The fact that 3 of the 10 sponsors this election cycle withdrew their support is testimony to the fact that it is now becoming expensive to being too politically associated with the Commission. If we can broaden that attack to not just include corporations, but actually the individual candidates, we're going to start to see some headway. We're going to start to break the Commission's monopoly.
George Farah, I want to thank you for being with us, founder and executive director of Open Debates, also author of No Debate, How the Republican and Democratic Parties Secretly Control the Presidential Debates. He'll be joining us tonight. We'll be starting a half